Hi everybody, it's Evelyn Kinwoman. I hope this message finds you well and that wherever you are in this moment, in this season of your life, you are finding the answers to questions, you are finding the healing to hurt, and that whatever it is you need, I pray that a portion of that may come from the words I'm going to share with you today. And so today I just wanted to share a little bit about my background, why I began Kinwoman Collective, and how I arrived to basically being Kinwoman. What does that mean? What's the story behind that? So let's get right into it. So Kinwoman Collective actually got started 2 years ago, 2017. Yeah, 2 years ago. And at that time, I was in the middle of my own healing process, my own healing journey. And I was longing for a space, for a voice, for wisdom, for elders and wise ones, and you name it. Those who had gone through what I was feeling, what I was going through, and could put words and information and describe what I was going through. Because sometimes I felt like I was just trying to piece information together. And so when I thought about Kinwoman Collective, I really had no idea what I was doing, but I knew that it was going to be a space for healing, growth, and becoming for women and men too, but mostly women. And so that's how we got started. But a little bit about my healing journey at that time. I was in the thick of trying to decide whether I was going to stay in my marriage or leave my marriage. And at that point, I didn't have an answer. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that in that moment, I had to do work on myself first before I could even receive my husband or even try to make the marriage work. I knew I had reached that point when you just know that you can't continue doing things the same way anymore. You have to do something different. That's where I was at that point. And so I decided that I was going to go to therapy. And it was the first time in my life I had ever been to therapy. It was fear. There was fear there of, gosh, what are they going to think about me? Who, if people find out or whatever the case, the fear of going to therapy for the first time. And so there was a lot of fear, but I picked up the phone and I called a couple of therapists, and then I finally settled on one. And the first day of therapy, I got there and it just continued on from there. But what came from that decision of seeking therapy was I was no longer dealing with the hurt, the pain, the changes that were happening internally. I was no longer dealing with them on my own. At least in therapy, I could speak freely without judgment. At least in therapy, I was talking to somebody who didn't know me, and I knew that I could pour myself into the process and not really think twice about it. And so at that time, really, I mean, there were days where I would go to therapy, and right after therapy, I would come home and just cry and just cry and cry and cry. I remember like sometimes I started to describe it as a great sadness because that's how it felt. It was more than depression. It was like it's a different kind of sinking. It was like the bottom had just opened up and I could not stop falling into it. But I knew that I couldn't stop. I knew that I had to keep going. But in the process of going to the bottom, I was also screaming for help. I was also screaming for spirit to catch me. And that's actually the first time in my life that I noticed my spirituality starting to like really come out and evolve. And so, I remember my bathroom being like my sanctuary. When that sadness came, I would feel it coming. I would feel it just like slowly coming. And it was to the point where like my husband and my children could sense it too. So they would just act. My husband sometimes would get the kids and leave the house because that's how like overwhelming I think it was for him too. But I never fought it. Whenever I would feel it, I would get up and go to the bathroom, and my battleground was my bathroom floor. I would cry and I would scream and I would cry out to God. It just hold me here. Just hold me here. Let me hold your hand while I'm on my way to the bottom. Because surely if I'm on my way to the bottom, there's gotta be a wind somewhere that's going to scoop me up and bring me back up. And so if you guys have ever read the book The Shack, when he talks about the great sadness. The first time I read the Shack, I was like, the great sadness. That's a very interesting way of putting it. And I didn't know exactly what he meant in that book, but experiencing it myself, it was like, oh man, remember when you were 19 years old and you read this book and it talked about the great sadness? This is what it feels like. And so that was the beginning. And there was no going back at that point, because for months I had been praying for God to show me. I had been praying for God to open my eyes about anything and everything. And at that time I was praying, thinking I was asking for success, or God, you know I'm hardworking, you know I'm talented, you know I'm gifted, and I'm wanting to use this gift and this talent. So, hey, make a way so I can get a job, because the stay-at-home mom thing is really difficult when bills have to be paid. And so my prayers were somewhat directed towards career and opportunities and stuff, but that's not what happened. What ended up happening was my entire life crashed before my face. I was a new mom to a 6-month-old. This was my third child. I had just moved back into my home after a separation, and we decided to try again. And at that point, I was like in this place of just like, I want to build a better marriage. I want to build a better relationship. So show me everything. And when I prayed that prayer, let me tell you, God showed me everything. And it became bigger than me. It became bigger than me to the point where I was just like, stop. I don't want to continue this anymore. I don't know what's going on. But what I didn't know was the moment I prayed that prayer, I was also saying yes to healing. And that healing was no longer just about me. It was also about my mother, my father, my ancestors, my children. It was about every single person who's ever lived through my bones. Every single person whose story I carry in my bones. And so working on the marriage at that point was just like, I can't work on this marriage because I don't even know how to be. I don't even know how to be at this point. Everything is falling apart. But I'm not leaving the marriage. I'm going to continue going to therapy. And God gave me the grace and the patience to figure this out. And so it became like, it was 3 years. 3 years of devoted work to healing. And in those 3 years, that's when I opened an Instagram account. I started sharing some of my writings. And they went from being creative writings about little stories from Africa, or poetry about Africa and womanhood and motherhood and stuff, to like really in-depth, deep, thought-provoking posts for myself. And I wasn't posting for anybody, but people were relating as well. And so when I was doing that, I think my journey and my service actually came together. And that's where Kin Woman Collective really started making sense for me. And so I think the greatest thing that came from that was understanding my why I am here, why I am supposed to be talking and sharing. And I think this is the gift of service, right? That once we experience, once we live it, we can then pour that out to somebody else who needs it. Because of the almost 7 billion people on this planet, surely most of us are hurting. Surely most of us have either experienced pain, abandonment, neglect, betrayal, loneliness, rejection, anxiety. We've all experienced something, because we are the bodies, the homes that house all emotions. And so that's where Kin Woman Collective really started. And so I do hope you come along for the journey. I do hope you stay for the conversations. I do hope that we can share and exchange with each other and learn from each other, and that we will create a safe space together to have conversations about the things that hurt the most, and to respect each other in sharing, and to know that even when we do disagree, ultimately we are all looking to make our way home. And home has 1,000 ways to get there. We all will get there, but we will get there differently. And that's the purpose of Kin Woman Collective. So that ultimately we can live our lives having done the work. And at the end of this journey, we can say we did our part, and we hand the baton over to the next generation. So I hope you stick around. I'm really, really excited to be doing this. I'm really excited to, feel confident now enough to be in a space where I can cultivate space through video for others and speak about it with heart and soul and spirit. So I hope you stick around, and I will talk to you soon. Have a good evening.